So you're Blues captain Ryan O'Reilly, and you want a haircut that's as custom as your stick curve. At Great Clips, we save your haircut details in clip notes, so you get your signature look every time. We got you, and you got this. Great Clips, official hair salon of the NHL.
Joining us now, as he does every Wednesday, our TSN insider from the Rain Dregs Hockey Podcast, Mr. Darren Dreger with Sekeres and Price. How you doing, Dregs?
Yeah, I'm doing well. Just downtown Montreal here, trolling around. The general managers just went into their meetings, so we're just bumping elbows with player agents and things like that.
The hurry up and wait of the draft. I remember it well outside of conference room doors.
Well, if that's if that's your current audience, how much scuttlebutt is about this Russian angle that we've been monitoring here? Because I'm sure that the agents there have got a lowdown on their current clients and future clients on ability to get guys out and the worry of drafting these guys.
Well, in fairness, that'll be a topic that, we talk to the managers about after their meeting, Blake. I haven't heard a lot outside of the media conversations that we've had here in Montreal. Like, the player agents really aren't talking about it. But I guess, if you're vested interest and you're an agent that represents some of these players like Dan Milstein, you're going to have some questions, you're going to have some concerns, and you're going to hope that some of those answers are going to come directly from the National Hockey League. So, we don't expect that there'll be a ton on the NHL agenda, but there's always a couple of interesting items, and maybe the reaction to that developing story will be part of it.
I mean, at the very least, I have to. They can't force them, but I have to think that every NHL team is encouraging the Russian players to stay here, or get to safe harbor, basically. Somewhere outside of Russia, especially. Earlier this year, Putin railed against what he called traitors and scum, Russians who earn their money in the West but don't live or spend enough time in Russia. What are you hearing on JT Miller?
Well, just that it is a developing story, and that doesn't come as a surprise to you guys. I mean, we've talked about many times on the segment before. What we know is there's a high level of motivation, more from those teams that are deeply interested in JT Miller than there is from the Vancouver Canucks. Vancouver knows they've got him under contract for a year. There's no rush to trade him. And the ask is high. It depends on who you talk to. So I'm going to be careful in rolling out the specifics on what Vancouver needs in return. But again, we've talked about it on the show before. Vancouver wants good, young NHL players coming back. The draft picks can be part of a package, but that can't be the motivator to closing on a deal. So the messaging from the Canucks is there is a willingness to be patient, but they also know that there's risk in being patient. The appetite is strong, mostly from Eastern Conference-based teams. So based on the dialogue that I had this morning, would I be surprised if JT Miller wasn't traded this week? Yeah, I'd be surprised. But Vancouver's going to stick to their guns. When Jim Rutherford and Patrick Allvin know that the best deal is available to them, they'll close on it. So, we got to give some wiggle room to the possibility that doesn't happen this week and may happen prior to the trade deadline, but there seems to be more motivation to get something done here.
Who are the most aggressive teams out there and looking for a high-end offensive forward at top six?
I mean, there's a lot, right? Ottawa, as an example, is looking for a top six player forward. But Ottawa is thinking more along the lines of dangling the 7th pick overall if they're going to acquire a piece. And I'm not connecting Ottawa to Vancouver. I'm answering the question as you asked it. The New York Rangers say they don't have anything close on JT Miller, but New York feels like still a top contender. What are the Boston Bruins going to do? Any team in the Eastern Conference that feels like they're going to be challenged to contend with Tampa Bay Lightning again, maybe the Florida Panthers, the Toronto Maple Leafs, they're interested in a JT Miller. And maybe it's one of those teams that's just as interested in JT Miller outside of the Lightning. I mean, how do they make that work? So I'm looking at the New York Rangers. I'm looking at potentially the Boston Bruins, although no one has really connected that for me. Some want to suggest the New Jersey Devils, but I believe that New Jersey is more inclined to add a defenseman. They're looking for a defenseman. There's no doubt about that. But there's multiple teams, according to those close to JT Miller, that are pushing pretty hard.
Even if we've asked you this before, it can change with the conversations that you've heard since. The Kevin Fiala bar, if you will. Do you think the Canucks need more than that, or if they ultimately got that tomorrow or the next day, do they pull the trigger on that?
Yeah, well, that's a pretty good deal, to be fair. The return was Brock Faber, a noted NHL prospect. He is going to be a good player, according to those outside of the Minnesota Wild. This isn't Billy Guerin talk. This is other managers who are looking at the return. And then the fact that Rob Blake and the LA Kings stepped up in a big way and extended Kevin Fiala immediately. And fellas, that's an important distinction here. My sources say that hasn't happened. I believe that the Bartletts, who represent JT Miller, have had loose conversation about the parameters of a JT Miller extension, but no team has been given permission yet to have that negotiation process get underway. But you got to believe that if Vancouver is closing in on a JT Miller trade, that's the first thing that's going to happen, right? Patrick Galvin or Jimmy Rutherford are going to reach out to the Bartletts to say, okay, we're getting close. Do you need to have a conversation with that club? Because an extended JT Miller probably enhances the rate of return as well.
So do you think that he's being acquired right now as a player, as a 1 year rental, and then teams would they definitely have to have the extension?
I feel like they need the extension. I do, and I'm not certain of that. But again, having the conversations that I've had as late as an hour ago with people who are involved, not Canucks related, I should say, feel strongly that's going to happen. It hasn't happened yet, but they feel strong, and that's just common sense, right? Because again, the deal probably gets sweeter if you know that you've got JT Miller agreed to a long term.
It's in everybody's interest. It's in the Canucks' interest, the acquiring team's interest, and JT Miller's interest. So if there's a Miller deal without an extension, something has broken down there for sure. Right. But I'm with you, Darren. I think it's got to be part and parcel of a trade, much like Fiala. Tyler Myers, we've heard his name here locally. What are you hearing on the big right shot defenseman from the Canucks?
Yeah, kind of the same as has been speculated in the Vancouver market. Just based on where Tyler Myers is at contractually, I think that it's common sense that his name would be out there in a speculative way. I don't get the sense that there's anything new in terms of teams stepping up. And, I got that from pretty good source within the organization yesterday, but things can develop relatively quickly. And even though at times Tyler Myers has been a beacon of criticism in that market, try and find an enormous right shot defenseman who is approaching the tail end of his contract. So I suspect that there's interest in him, but as of yesterday, that it didn't seem like there was anything that the Vancouver Canucks were heading towards or angling on.
Heard so much about second overall with New Jersey, seventh overall with Ottawa. What other picks are you hearing could be in play? And what about the Canucks at 15? Have you picked up anything on them and that selection?
No, I haven't on 15. But I do think you have to look at, anything in the top 10 right now, with the exception of the first pick overall. For the life of me, I can't imagine that, the Montreal Canadiens are going to kick the spotlight away and not embrace an opportunity to draft first overall in the city of Montreal. I just don't think that, Jeff Molson, the owner of the Montreal Canadiens, would entertain that in any way. Checked with my sources out of New Jersey. There's ongoing discussion on the second pick overall, but the Devils need a real specific player there. And I hinted at a defenseman. I mean, that would be their preference, but you're talking about a young defenseman, established NHL player, probably in that 26 or younger category where you control his future. Better yet, if it's a player who's under contract. So automatically I start thinking about Jake Chychrun and the Arizona Coyotes as a possibility. So then you come up with interesting scenarios, don't you? You've got Arizona picking 3. I know the Columbus Blue Jackets have been in constant communication with the Arizona Coyotes on Jacob Chychrun as well. Columbus has the 6th pick overall. So could there be something done there where Arizona, has to get that 6th pick? So it's interesting time. So when I talk about the possibility of those picks being in play, it makes more sense if they're in play for players going a different direction. Early on we speculated on, well, what if Ken Hughes of the Montreal Canadiens could land that third pick as well? It seems more unlikely, or the second pick, sorry, from New Jersey. It seems unlikely that that's going to happen, but there is still a good amount of dialogue on picks 2 through maybe Vancouver's pick at 15, maybe.
We're just getting to know Jim Rutherford and Patrick Allvin, but you've been around them a lot more. They seem to have a really good handle on this cone of silence thing, and it sort of led us to convince ourselves that a trade out of left field is a possibility here in the next 48 hours because they have just kept everything so would that surprise you if, in addition to a JT Miller trade, there is something else for the Vancouver Canucks?
Well, it depends on what something else is. Like I had a team ask me about Bo Horvat. Now, I didn't run it by the Vancouver Canucks, and the only reason the team asked was it was, again, just on a fishing expedition. I have not heard that name in any way, shape, or form, so I don't want this to be speculation that leads to the potential of Horvat being in play. That's not what I'm suggesting. What I'm saying is something like that, yeah, that would surprise me.
Yeah.
But to your point, Jimmy Rutherford and Patrick Allvin, they do it the right way. They're not using guys like me, the media, to build up a market. Based on relationships, if you ask a direct question of those guys, you're going to get a direct answer. But they're not going to do the play-by-play through social media to try and maybe create a bigger market. Those guys work in an exhaustive fashion. So they don't need social media to drum up a market. They know what they've got for the players that they're willing to part with, and they will know when the time is right to pull the trigger.
Lastly, for me, can't remember a draft where we've had more knowledge of the second and third pick than we do of the first. I think it's pretty simple that, whoever Montreal doesn't take is going to go second, and then probably Logan Cooley third overall. What are you hearing, Slavkovsky or Wright? Who do you think they go with?
Yeah, you know what? Anybody who thinks they know and isn't in the inner sanctum of the Montreal Canadiens is guessing. Guessing, because I feel like they're still deliberating. They do. I mentioned Jeff Molson earlier. This is a big deal to the owners of the Montreal Canadiens, hosting the draft, again, picking first overall. And there are some who think, and I haven't talked to Molson about this, that it's important to take a Canadian. So you've got Shane Wright, who's the top available Canadian center. You've got Logan Cooley, who's a center as well. I'm told he's going to be a terrific NHL player. And then you've got Slavkovsky, the Slovak, who is a beast of a human being and has proven that he can be impactful at men's level on the world stage at the Olympics. So it still feels gut feeling at this point that Shane Wright is likely going first overall. But I talked to those close to Shane Wright, again, not long ago, inside an hour, and they still don't have a definitive answer to that. This very literally could drag into tomorrow afternoon.
Wonderful stuff, Dregs. We know you're busy there. We'll let you get back at it. Thank you for this,
Thanks,
my
man.
friend.
All right, guys. Thank you.